Buddhism is an ancient tradition with answers to life's biggest questions today. Why do we suffer? How do we relate to other beings? And how do we make the world a happier and more peaceful place for everyone? Our mission at BDK America is to help people understand Buddhism better. Are you looking to start learning about Buddhism or dig deeper? BDK America offers free books and videos for peoples of all ages and levels. Our most popular book, The Teaching of Buddha, is available to read in English and 46 other languages in physical, PDF, and audiobook formats. Visit our website for our latest publications and order your own free copy today.
Hello, and welcome to our show. I hope you had a meaningful and enjoyable week. I like to begin with a joke. Why aren't there any Buddhist rhythm and blues musicians? Give up? Are you ready for this? It's because Buddhists got no soul. Well, if you didn't get it, and probably many of you didn't, I will explain soon, for the answer goes to the heart of today's topic. Specifically, as we continue our discussion on the second mark of existence, which is that life is interdependent, I would like to concentrate on a dimension of this mark which is rarely talked about, and I shall call this dimension or quality the sacred self. The sacred self is talked about, for example, in the Nirvana Sutra as the great self, and this great self is none other than the awakened self, or how an awakened person sees oneself and others. For one who has realized nirvana, each person, living being, and inanimate thing is inherently sacred. And they are sacred since they have intrinsic worth and are unique unto themselves. Normally, when a second mark of existence is discussed, people pay most attention to the interdependent and interconnected dimension, as they should. We too did so in previous shows on our cosmic and societal connections. In other words, between the whole and its parts, the whole tends to get much more attention than each of the parts. Why is this emphasis a problem? When those cosmic and societal dimensions of this mark are applied to people, they can be misconstrued as denying the sacred qualities and even the very existence of the individual person. Perhaps this is easy to do since, as I explained previously, this mark carries the meaning of non-self or no soul. These translations can be confusing. What the correct teaching of non-self or no soul means is that there is nothing in myself that doesn't change and exist completely independent of anything else. In Buddhism, the self at any given time is viewed as being comprised of 5 physical psychological elements, which are senses, feelings, thoughts, volition, and consciousness. However, in this context, there is no soul or any other unchanging, independently existing entity over and beyond these 5 elements. This is why Buddhists are labeled with the phrase, no soul. Going back to our joke, hopefully you can better appreciate the double meaning or play on words for soul. In continuing today's main discussion, let's examine how terms such as no soul and non-self can diminish the sacred quality of a person and even be misconstrued to deny one's very existence. I too was confused for a long time when I first learned about this mark back when I was a student in the seminary. I went around saying to myself, I don't exist, or Ken Tanaka is not real. I thought this teaching denied my very existence. But of course, I existed as a breathing, thinking, living individual with an address in California and a social security number. I eventually came to realize that we had to make a distinction between religious truth and mundane truth. The teaching of non-self was on the level of religious truth, but on a mundane level, my very existence was real. This confusion has contributed to the denying of not only one's existence, but also one's worth. A good example was the case in Japan before and during the Second World War. During that period of an oppressive military regime, this Buddhist teaching of non-self was incorrectly interpreted and applied to benefit the state and its military objectives. It contributed to the undermining of the sacred qualities of the individual and fostered the sacrificing of personal rights and freedom in service of the state, which included the ultimate sacrifice of one's life. I wonder how many people, both ordinary soldiers and civilians in Japan and elsewhere, lost their lives unnecessarily in the belief that the state was more important than individual lives. Regrettably, some Buddhist leaders, consciously or unconsciously, supported the military state by perpetuating this misguided interpretation of the Buddhist truth. However, many Buddhist institutions since have taken steps to self-reflect and atone for their past mistakes. Let's refer back to the metaphor of the Indra's net of jewels, which I cited in an earlier show on the cosmic dimension of the second mark of existence. Traditionally, this metaphor does not explicitly express the sacred self or the sacred dimension of the individual parts. However, if we were to do so, I think we can paint the following image in imparting a visual expression to the dimension of the sacred self. Despite the immeasurable number of illuminating jewels, each jewel is reflected in every other jewel. No jewel is left out. Every jewel is counted and recognized. Every jewel is valued and needed for the totality to function. Hence, every jewel has inherent worth. Also, no jewel or a group of jewels is more dominant or considered superior to others. No hierarchy exists, for all the jewels have equal value. Further, despite the immeasurable number of jewels, no two are the same. For every jewel is unique in its shape, size, color, and texture. Even the illumination of each jewel differs in its hue, sheen, and brightness. Every jewel is unique. Hence, when this vision of the sacred self is applied to the human world, particularly to contemporary American society, it shows that each person has worth and makes a valuable contribution to the whole. In real life, we sometimes feel as though we have no influence in society and nothing we do will be of any consequence, particularly with regards to issues of a global scale, such as global warming. However, as the jewel net shows, the effort and contribution of each person has value and real impact. No matter how minuscule it may seem, the effects of our efforts are not lost. This gives a sense of worth and value to our very existence and effort. Also, this Buddhist vision affirms the inherent worth of each person, regardless of one's race, religion, or economic standing. However, the reality is, of course, different. For example, people of color are still often referred to as the minority, as distinct from people of European descent who make up the majority. For me personally, as an American of Japanese descent and a Buddhist, I had to work myself out of the emotional and psychological hole of regarding myself as a minority, with its subtle, suggestive message of not being fully equal. And I'm sure that other minorities are able to identify with my experience. What helped me out of this mental dilemma was the Indra's net of jewels. It painted a vision of what is true and real, thereby helping me to overcome the effects of how society saw me and labeled me. Of course, what is great about America is that it continues to evolve toward an ideal society, spurred on by the spirit of expanding opportunity, as reflected in the founding principles of democracy and justice. Over the span of this evolutionary process, more and more minorities than ever before are valued for their abilities and accomplishments. As Buddhists, this political and social progress simply reinforces my religious vision as expressed by the Indra's net of jewels. And most of all, one's unique qualities, even if they are not part of the majority, are affirmed. It is this spirit that is expressed in today's passage, which describes the lotus flowers in the lakes of the Pure Land, or the realm of awakening or nirvana. In that environment, each flower is affirmed to be true to itself, without being pressured to be something else. The color of blue radiates a blue light, the yellow, a yellow light, the red, a red light, and the white, a white light. On a familiar note, doesn't this remind many of you of Mr. Rogers' famous line from his TV show, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood? There is no one like you in the whole wide world. You are fine just the way you are. Does this mean Mr. Rogers was a Buddhist? I'm kidding, of course, for he was a Presbyterian minister. My point is that many religions arrive at similar conclusions, for instance, about the sacredness of each person. When we experience what is real, we all acquire soul, even Buddhists. Thank you for being with us. See you next week when we discuss an optimistic teaching of the Buddha nature with an interesting guest affiliated with the Rissho Kosekai denomination of Buddhism.
We at Bukkyo Dendo Kyokai pursue peace and happiness for people around the world. We have published the Buddhist teachings into 41 languages and donated our publication to hotels and other facilities in 55 countries. We would like to share the Buddhist teachings with people around the world. That's our mission. Visit our website for more information